Greetings from Hyderabad. Today's event focuses on Sitecore Agentic Studio, and it's a deep dive into Sitecore Agentic Studio presented by Arvind Gehlot and hosted by Vishal and Yamini. Over to you, Arvind.
Thank you, Yamini, and welcome everyone. Feeling great to be presenting on Sitecore AI Agentic Studio. This session basically built on fundamentals, but goes a little more deeper into the engineering decisions, how context parameters shape agent behavior, how shapes or schemas enforce output contract, how HTML templates bridge JSON and human, and how workflows compose it all together. We will anchor everything in one simplest example. So let's kick off with a very little intro before diving in. Quick background, I'm Arvind, have spent better part of 18 years in my career in Microsoft and Sitecore ecosystem, wearing multiple hats from developer to solution architect. I joined Horizontal Word in 2015 and have watched it evolve from XP to all the way to composable and now AI first era. I'm currently at Horizontal Digital, where my focus is on complex sidecore implementation and more recently, AI driven content and workflow automation. Happy to connect on community or LinkedIn after the session if anyone wants to discuss anything. So here is our roadmap for next 30 minutes or so. We will open with what Agentic Studio actually is, its role in Sitecore ecosystem and how you get access to it. Then we will quickly run through the vocabularies like agents, flows, signals, spaces, actions, and workflows. So the core of the session is section 3 through 7. The 5 layers you configure when you build an agent. We will close with the concrete simplest agent and multi-step flow, tying all 5 layers together. So feel free to hold questions to the end, but if something is really urgent, flag me and I'll try to weave it in. Okay, let's set the stage. Agentic Studio, so Sitecore Agentic Studio. So this tool is basically Sitecore's AI first execution layer, not a simple chatbot, not simple prompt box, but a structured environment where you define agents, attach context, specify what they output, and orchestrate multiple multi-state workflows. Think of it as the difference between asking AI a question and handling AI a job specs. For marketers or marketing team, it means delegating repeatable task into research, brief content without losing brand control. For engineers, it means configuring typed inputs, schema constrained output, and workflow logic. 6 terms you will hear throughout, worth being precise about each one, like what are all these parts. So I'll start with an agent. Agent is a bounded task specific worker, whereas a flow is what you built when one agent is not enough. So flow is when we weave in multiple workflows, not workflows, multiple agents. But point to be noted here that you might not see flow anymore in Agentic Studio in the left navigation because it's keep on evolving. User interfaces keep on evolving. Earlier it was there in the left navigation, but now it is under the agent creation workflow itself. Next, we have signals. So signals basically are live market intelligence, uh, which Sitecore pull into the agents or agents workflow or agent execution. So if you want to pull in some additional intelligence from market or up to details information, then we could use signals in that case, so that agents are not reasoning in vacuum. We can provide some kind of context and live context with the help of these signals. Then we have spaces, which give you run history and auditability, which is essentials for governance. So we sometimes we need what task, what agent has been executed in the history, and what was the outcome. So that all can be found in spaces. Then we have actions, which is the conversational entry point if user don't want to pick an agent themselves. And context is the umbrella for everything you attach to constrain and inform agent behavior. So context where we can tell that, okay, what are the constraints and what should how agent should behave, that configuration can be taken care in the context. Then brand knowledge guidelines and the context parameters will go deeper, like how we can configure it and how we can use it in few minutes. So every agent in Agentic Studio is built from exactly 5 components. So think of them as layers. The overview layer, where the user, uh, where actually the user facing configuration section, where we can define that what is the agent called, what is the agent name, what does it do, what input should someone provide when running it. Then we have context parameter, and context parameters are the engineer's layer, where we can add typed variable that inject brand knowledge and control branching behavior. Then we have schemas, which is basically a output contract, we can say, where a JSON schema, uh, that model must satisfy every single run. So if you don't provide the JSON schema, the output would be flat. Output could add anything. But when you add a JSON schema to the agent, then schema agent will make sure that it will follow the JSON schema along with the output that you want. And that is the next one is the HTML template. And HTML template is what turns machine output into something a marketer can read or share. And the workflow, that is basically a sequence of all of it. So initialize the run, compose the prompt, generate to schema, save the artifact, and end the task. That is whole been taken care in workflow. Pre-built agents like blog writer already have all 5 configured. Custom agents let you define them from scratch. So if you copy existing agent and expand it further, then it's all components are already been configured and you can just verify, you can just modify it as per your need. But uh, when you want to create something from scratch, then you need to understand it very well. Context parameter. So context parameter are arguably the most important thing to get right when designing an agent. Without them, the model is essentially guessing what tone, scope, and audience you want. With them, you get repeatable, brand aligned, auditable output. The 3 categories like brand, technical, governance map to the 3 audience who can who cares about agent output? Like marketers, engineers, compliance, and legal. These are three completely separated team members. They might need different, they might see the content differently, and that is why it is really important to provide these contexts, provide the context parameters, so that we can get the correct output at the end. And this is the key pattern: defining the config, referencing the workflow. So when we define these context parameters, so we can use them in the later stage or later action in the workflow. So we'll further go through it. A quick tip before moving next is never hard code brand values or any kind of credentials directly into prompt text. Parameterize them so they can be updated without touching workflow logic. So if you parameterized it, then you don't need to go through all the places where those can be used. So if once you define the parameters, those parameters can be used anywhere within the workflow. Then we have schema. Schema where you enforce output quality at the design time rather than hoping the model gets it right in the runtime. Think of it as typed interface between your agent and the rest of the system. The section you see here are drawn from a real production agent. The pattern of executive summary, scored section, with finding arrays, optimization opportunities, and weighted summary is highly reusable. In the agent, JSON, the schema lives in the schema array. The generated content action reference it via structured schema variable. So my advice, one more advice here is design the report on paper first. What section, what scores, what table, then encode it. The schema is the most durable part of an agent. Context and template changes more often. So once you define the schema, that schema can help across all the steps, all the actions. Context and templates might change. You can transform that structure into HTML output. You can transform that schema into text output. So whatever output is required, that can be taken care later, but we should define the schema very well. Then we have HTML templates. As I mentioned earlier, schema defined everything. Once the schema is defined, the schema can be utilized on various formats. And here HTML templates comes into the picture. HTML templates are the presentation layer, we can say. They are they are what transform a content but raw JSON blob into something you can actually put in front of stakeholders. The most important rule, keep your template field path exactly in the sync with your schema property name. So as I mentioned, schema is really important. Once schema is defined, that schema can be used within this HTML template, but that is what we need to take care. Whatever the keyword we are using in schema, we should use exactly same keyword in the HTML template itself. So if the schema says executive summary dot overall score, then the template placeholder must say the same name. If there is any mismatch, and the placeholder will render empty output because there is a mismatch and HTML template is not able to find out the proper schema property, then it will break the output. So that is the precaution we should always take. We have some community articles like um, Sitecore Solution audit agent article has the copy paste ready template. So we already have few agents, we can make use of it. My recommendation is, and also Sitecore recommendation is, start from a community template, then modify it to match your schema's specific section. You'll get benefit out of it for sure, but don't forget to understand each section very well, as I mentioned, and that is the whole purpose of this session, to make you aware of all these sections, so that even though when you are just copy pasting or duplicating your current agent, you can very well make use of those agents if you understand all these sections very well. Two important concept here, a workflow, which is what a single agent runs step by step. So workflow is basically a collection of multiple actions. So we'll cover that up as well. But a flow is what you build when you need multiple agent working in sequence or parallel. So workflow covers one agent execution, whereas flow is connecting multiple agents so that the input of one agent, output of one agent can become input for another agent, and so on and so forth until you get your final result. Again, whenever we are talking about working with multiple agent, we define the output parameter, and that output parameter becomes the input parameter for other user or for other agent, not user. And we'll check during our demo as well, like how it is configured. Then flows are for multi-stage jobs. Uh, like the brief to content flow is a classic. Researcher feed the brief generator feeds the content generator, then optionally a human review before save. Each agent stays narrowly focused. They are the key insight, and spaces give you a single view of the entire flow run, research, artifact, brief, and final content all in one place. So once agent is executed or once flow is executed, you can go to the spaces where you can check everything, that okay, at each step what was the input, what was the output, that can also be configured. So in spaces you can get all the audit trail and the history of that particular agent execution. Okay, let's make all five building blocks concrete with a real agent. The web accessibility agent takes a URL or HTML and output a scored conformance audit. So I created it when I was learning Agentic Studio. So it I as Sitecore recommended, I just created a copy of existing SEO agent and make modification into it so that it now it generates the accessibility auditing report where it can say that okay, how compliance your accessibility depending on the URL that you are providing to that. The schema section, here we are using everything like context parameters, schemas, workflows, HTML templates. So I configured each and everything with my tone into that agent, covering all these. And as I mentioned, the workflow follows the standard 6-step pattern. The HTML templates render all that we want, something that we can hand over to the client or hand over to the marketer's team. So which is really important. It could be anything, like we can generate a particular article, we can generate a Word document, we can generate presentation, whatever we want to do, we can provide that into the HTML templates section. And as I mentioned, I use this, and that is actually the source for my accessibility agent, uh, SEO researcher agent, and that is also uses the same identical schema family as the web accessibility agent. It also has executive summary, scored section, optimization opportunity, and citation forecast. The citation forecast section is particularly forward-looking. It predicts which AI assistant are likely to surface the content, something like ChatGPT, Perplexity, Copilot, Gemini, all those models. And that's becoming a real concern for marketers or marketing team as AI based search grows. It will be really, really important to have a contextual output. The technical lesson here is that once you are designed a solid schema pattern, you can reuse it across other agents. The compose message, template, and context parameter changes, but the schema and HTML stays structurally consistent. And that consistency is what let you compare audit results over the time and across agents. So this is the pattern marketing team reach for the most, like campaign form, brief to content, 5 stages, 5 agents, output of each, feeding input for the next agent. The optional human review gate at stage 4 is worth calling out. Like in the entire automation, we can add one more action, which require a human intervention to quickly go through it, review it, and then approve it. So once any human approve before it saves to the output. And that is your governance checkpoint. If you need sign off before content goes to Sitecore or any other system, so that is really important critical action that we can have during the workflow execution. Rule of thumb, use a flow when your job has distinct stages like research, plan, create, approve, publish. That is distinct stages. And use a single agent when it's one focused task, one audit, one report, and one classification. So if we just need one thing, we can always go with the single agent. But if we need specific task in sequence or in parallel and we just need to prepare a consolidated report, then we can use flows where multiple agents work together in sequence, in parallel, depending on how we design that flow. 6 areas, 3 tips each. So we have mainly 6 areas here and 3 tips to each area. So this slide is meant to be a reference. You can come back to the most common mistake I see people skip schema design and just see what the model produces. That works once um, and many times, but that break the second time because the output shape has drifted. I mean, you may not get the similar kind of output all the time because sometimes you are getting few fields, next time you might not get those fields. And that is why we need schema first always. The second most common mistake is no context parameter. So the agent does not know brand or scope. Output are generic and the team loses lost the trust in the tool. Like if every time they are getting a different output without any proper context, then team will lose the trust. and we should take care of it. The next thing is the signal and the brand. So signal and brand section at the bottom right is often overlooked. Configuring signals by topic means your agent automatically get market context every time they run. So if we really wants to fetch the real context into the agent, real life, real time context into the agent, so that think about like LLM model, which is having historical data, and we are adding real-time conversation, real-time details, injecting into the agent. So that is where this this agent comes into the picture, like signals. Sitecore calls it signals. Uh, To close, Agentic Studio is production ready for team willing to invest in proper agent design, like context parameters, schema, templates, and workflows. These the three action I would give you the first try by before you build, like first try before you build. Try with few existing agents, try to modify, try to configure different context parameter, make a modification into schema, make a modification into HTML template, and then finally compare your final result. So that are really important section. We should always make use of it. Uh, there are a few agents like community articles on Sitecore Solution Audit Agent has copy paste schemas. So like you can even import export once that agent is configured. You can import export, and then you can make multiple copies of those existing agents. So play around it, and you will be well versed along with learning. Uh, Next is live demo. So now we'll jump on a few walkthrough like how we can create an agent. Like as I mentioned, as Sitecore is also recommending that okay, we can duplicate existing agent, but sometimes it might not work. If some debugging is needed, then you probably, if you don't have idea of all these sections, then debugging would be really, really critical for you. And that is why we covered in this demo that how we can go through all these sections so that we can understand it very well. So let me open the Agentic Studio. Okay. I hope you can see it. So as I mentioned, I took a very simple Hello World kind of application where we can see all these section, how this all would work. So we can create a new agent. I have already created it. Once you create, you can edit it, modify it. And here we discussed about like the overview, excuse me, um, the overview section where we can define what the agent is, what are the properties of it, what it will do, what kind of uh, input section it may have. There are few certain types already defined. We can select it. I just configured for prompt so that it will give you a prompt when you execute this. Then second most important is parameter that we discussed. So I, for very simplest agent, I configure just to take the gender of, uh, just to add the gender in the context so that output will consider gender, whatever you selected from this context parameter. Context, how it would shape. I mentioned how it shape what you should expect from this agent. So that is few configurations we can check for. It's keep on evolving, so we see multiple options here. Earlier, these were not available. Now you have multiple options, so we can go further and try and test out all these models and presentation. The second most important section is schema, and I created a Hello World schema here. So in the schema, earlier that view was also not available. So I, from beginning when I was starting on Agentic Studio, that was only available. So you just need to put a JSON here, and I created that JSON that time. But later on, as Agentic Studio product as a product is also getting evolved, now they have provided simple configuration tool here where we can add one more property. We can give the property name. We can define the property type, any kind of description, and then you can define the sequence. But earlier, I used to define the schema like that. And pay attention or whatever the name is given to it, and the same properties will be used later on in HTML template. So here in this section, we are defining the schema of the output we are expecting from agent. And once agent done its job, we will retrieve these information and will will show it in differently in HTML template. So here the HTML template I created where all those properties that we defined in schema, like you can see here, we have name, profession, specialization. That is exactly that we defined here, like name, profession, and specialization. So this is how we can use these properties here. And then next very important stuff is the workflow where everything is being weaved in to form the output. And when you come here, this is the way of like how agent can be triggered. Like it's a manual trigger. Will trigger this once we are gone through this workflow, and then we'll trigger and we'll see that what kind of output it can generate. So we are defining that, okay, manual trigger, then this action is needed to read the schema. Like we define the schema here. You can just click on it. As I mentioned during the presentation, we can define the parameter name, like what could be the what could be the input parameters that is needed to process this particular action, and what should be the output parameter name. So output parameter name, we have given structured schema, pay attention to it, and we will use this in next upcoming actions. Then we have compose message where we are telling agent that, okay, with the help of all these previous actions that you configured, add one more message so that the actual, because AI understood the message that we need to pass, and accordingly it can generate the content. So I provided that, okay, or whatever user message that we type in the prompt section will go through again when we execute it. Add this instruction as well, like create a complete bio following the structured format. That is additional prompt. It is not user prompt. We can say that it is a system prompt. So whatever prompt user will give, it will add as a system prompt, and finally we'll get the bio details of the person. And here we are defining that what would be the output variable name. Output variable name is composed message. And then here we have, like, for this action, it takes the input from it. It takes the output parameter for this action to execute itself. So here the output parameter was like composed message, and we are using best.compose message here. We are selecting, and the output parameter is generated content, and we have few additional system prompt. We selected that this is the structured schema that we defined here and here. So the schema ID is being used here so that it will generate the content with respect to this schema that we defined, and the HTML template that we defined here. So it will generate the schema, and then it will generate the HTML page exactly in the same way we defined here, and we configure here. And finally, we after everything is generated, we'll put it into the output parameter, which is generated content. And at the last stage, we are saying that, okay, use the generated content, which is from previous stage, and save it to the spaces, and then we'll get that information. So this is what a very simple schema, agentic agent that we have created following all those important components. Schema, compose message, generate content, covering everything like parameter, schemas, and HTML templates, and finally a workflow. So this is how we configure one single agent. Let's see if we execute this. So this is the agent that we created, and I'm just triggering it. I'm selecting, okay, this is the mail ID, and I'm typing like, whoops, keyboard is misbehaving. So I put Arvind and I executed it. Now, if we can see here, we can see all those messages like get structured schema. We set it to visible to the end user. We have compose message. We have generated content, generate content, and this is finally it generates the entire message. And we can click on it. We can see that, okay, what are the content? We selected uh, context parameter as male. I have provided name as Arvind. It generated the output like it is professional bio and generated profile. This spatialization it sets to the general profile. And this is the context, but remember we configured one JSON schema and it generates that schema here. And this schema should have exactly all the fields that we defined, like name, profession, and spatialization. Obviously few additional information would be there because it store the configuration, all the configuration here. Then as per the HTML template we defined, this is the HTML template we defined, and then finally how this would be visible that we can see in the preview. So this is how you can see that in HTML template, we define that name, and after that, we have the specific property name. So name is Irving, professional bio, and specialization is gender profile. So this is all about uh, the simplest Hello World agent. And as we discussed earlier, there are pre-built agents there. We can make duplicate it, like I duplicated multiple agents like researcher, AESCO that I discussed about in my presentation, that these are, and this is my updated agent on top of SEO researcher copy. So this is my version where I added some additional information, and that agent generate the report as per the accessibility, and that covers the level A, double A, triple A, those kind of. So those agents are there. But the purpose of this presentation is to make you aware that how important other section of the agent are, like context parameter, schemas, HTML template, and the workflow. So that is all about for this presentation. Feel free to connect anytime. I'm actively available on Slack, and I have LinkedIn profile as well. I'm active blogger as well, so leave out a comment, and happy to connect over LinkedIn. So if you have any question, I should be able to help you there. Over to you, Yamini.
Thank you so much, Arvind. I think it was really great session because I was using it the wrong way. I was trying to get custom agents using the existing agents, and I did not duplicate it. I was just adding and putting those inputs as like one element as a referral for the next agent. But I think this is really important to have schema and context basically because those two are the game changer. I saw this in your demo as well now. So I think it is the right way to use the agentic AI. So I'll incorporate those in my findings as well. Thank you so much for such an insightful session, Arvind.
Sure. Thank you so much. Happy.
Bye bye.
Yeah. See you. Bye.